Welcome to Chapter 4. Chapter 4 of the story of the Eighth Doctor. Nicknamed this section of the novel range the Mature Sam arc because she was away from the Doctor for 3 years and she matured quite a bit in that period of time. You might remember Chapter 3 when we had the theme Sam is missing. She was separated from the Doctor, she ran away, dealing with her attraction to him, or her lust for him, or whatever exactly that was, and reunites with him at the end, and is happy to continue traveling with him. And they have a much more equal relationship at this point. I mean, she's still young. I mean, she's 21, 22, something like that. And the Doctor, of course, is 1,012 or some age like that. But nevertheless, the type of relationship they have is much more equal at this point, and the maturity that Sam is able to show is very improved. So her idealism has been tempered a little bit, and now she's more of the worldly wise sort of character as she goes through these new group of adventures. So we're looking at novels 13 through 18 in the Eighth Doctor Adventures range. This is from the second half of 1998 and beginning of 99. And I read these circa 2008 to 2013, so it's been a while for me, so I'm a tad rusty myself. So when we do the walkthrough, this will be fairly quick. So let's do that fairly quick walkthrough. Book 13, we'll start there. Placebo Effect. This was a cool book because it has the Wirren in it, that one-off monster that Tom Baker, the Fourth Doctor, came across in Nerva Station. Ark in Space was the name of the episode. As a kid, I thought the Wirren were terrifying. For some reason, I'm not sure why, just the giant bug thing, I guess. Even though, you can look at it as an adult and just say, okay, check out the bubble wrap. It's so obvious with the guy transforming. But I guess maybe that's the thing. They touch you or they infect you and you turn into one. That's a pretty scary superpower. Also, fun fact, this is back when the Wirren had 3 R's in the name. I've noticed that the Big Finish stories only use 2. That threw me off for a while. And it's because in this book it has 3 R's. Wirren. Anyway, there's a very exciting fun fact for you. Now you know everything you need to know. Anyway, so Placebo Effect is a pretty cool book. It takes place in the very far future where the Wirren is the threat, and there's this sort of Olympic Games type of event for across the galaxy as Earth is rebuilding Earth itself, and there's this issue with drugs for the athletes. Perhaps a timely thing in the 90s. I don't know. But anyway, it turns out that the Wirren have engineered elements of themselves in certain drugs, so they're trying to spread their seed, so to speak, trying to spread their DNA and repopulate themselves in our galaxy through these drugs. So it's a very interesting take on that story. But what's also fun about this book is that it introduces Stacy and Sard, who are 2 of the Eighth Doctor's companions from a set of comics. This was the first crossover between comics and novels for this novel range, possibly the first of that sort ever. I don't know. But it allowed for the canonization of those comic books, and it sort of explained the gap that was intentionally and explicitly left way back in the book Vampire Science, where Sam narrates that the Doctor had dropped her off at a Greenpeace rally, and then he went off and had his own adventures for an entire year before he remembered to go back and pick her up. He felt guilty and sheepish about it, and she didn't really care. She thought it was weird, but so now we know what happened in that first year of his, that he was traveling with Stacy and Sard, and quite possibly other people like Izzy. So we dealt with that in chapter 1, I believe, of this series. Anyway, so Placebo Effect is the book that definitely points out, okay, well, Stacy and Sard were his traveling companions, at least during that period of time. The next book is Vanderdeken's Children. I remember pretty much nothing about this book, unfortunately. It's a sinister, derelict spaceship floating through space, and these two rival parties are fighting over it. And there's a mysterious presence on board, and the TARDIS has a hard time leaving. And I'm sure it was a good book, but it's been a while since I read it. The next one, though, is really cool. The Scarlet Empress. This is the first appearance of Iris Wildthyme in a novel. And if you're not familiar with Iris, she is a continuity breaker. She's sort of the parody of the Doctor. She's a female Time Lord, a Time Lady, if you like, and she travels around in a TARDIS, which is disguised as a London double-decker bus. It's smaller on the inside than the outside, supposedly. And she drinks all the time. And she's just there to have fun. She has a tendency to claim the Doctor's past adventures as hers, or claim that she was there with him on those adventures. Sometimes she claims that she had her own adventures that are parallel to his. So it's just comic relief in a way, but she's an interesting character in her own right, and she does get her own audio series eventually with Big Finish, so that's kind of fun. So the Scarlet Empress reads a lot like a D&D fantasy adventure. They just meet up, and then she, Iris that is, and the Doctor and Sam hop in the bus, and they go on this quest. They gotta find this thing and deal with these creatures, and on the way they come across golden-furred bears and monkeys that can fly, I think, and all sorts of weird stuff. And it's on this really fantasy type world, Hispero, and it's kind of it's almost silly. But if you're into it, it's really fun. And just further interesting aside, this story gets briefly referenced in the audio series Excellus, where Iris is central to that story, Excellus, and apparently a purse that she bought in this book on the planet Hispero turns out to be more than just a purse, and it has a huge impact for this planet or kingdom Excellus. So it's kind of fun that this book gets its shout out in audio media later on. The next book is the Janus Conjunction, and this is an interesting book. It reminded me actually no, I don't know what it reminded me of, but it's a kind of a dark story. There's this weird radiation on this planet and moon which makes people melt. It just breaks down the lipids in your body, and you get sticky and gooey and just fall apart eventually. And it's one of those things where if you stay on the moon, you will, once you're dosed with this radiation, you're actually better off staying there. You'll live longer. Whereas if you leave and the radiation is no longer there, you just fall apart much more quickly. And Sam gets a lethal dose of this radiation, and the Doctor and Sam are separated as usual, and they get caught up with different strands of events as one military group is dealing with what's going on this moon, and other people are dealing with political situations. It's a mess, as often happens in these books. And Sam actually dies at the end. It literally says like on this such and such a time on this date, Samantha Jones died. And then you have the last chapter or so where the Doctor jumps in the TARDIS, goes into temporal orbit, just like he did in the TV movie, and stays there until he figures out the cure. Then he goes back, saves her before she dies, so he technically edits history to make this work. So that's kind of... it would be a cop-out. It is kind of a cop-out, but it would be a worse offense if this kind of thing happened more often. But it's very rare that someone, at least at that point in time, that someone dies and the Doctor then goes and edits history. Perhaps in You Who on television, the many deaths of Rory Williams, that kind of issue, that might be a problem. But at this point in time, it was unusual. So Samantha Jones goes through quite a bit. The next book, Beltempest, has another solar system with another weird problem. This time, the star itself is the threat. It is growing in mass and doing all sorts of wacky stuff, sending out radiation, and the whole solar system is in threat. The whole thing is just going to be destroyed. And once again, Sam is nearly killed. She's exposed to the vacuum of space, and I think that's what happens, at least, and that happens to her in a book earlier as well, in the previous section. So a lot's happening to her now as she's getting older, I guess. And it turns out there's this giant alien seed inside the star. So this is one of those stories with giant creatures, planet-sized, star-sized creatures. So you throw in some religious zealotry about apocalyptic end times stuff for the solar system, and they're like worshipping death, and it feeds into the stars seed thing. It's an interesting little book. And then the last one, book 18 in this group, is called The Face Eater. And this also features another giant monster, not planet-sized this time, but it's still massive and telepathic, and it has most of its effect on people, from a distance through telepathy. The Face Eater is the name of the creature, but in this book, this takes place again in humanity's future, but early in the process of colonization. So this is a colony in the Proxima system, so it's, I believe, the closest or one of the closest star systems to our own here in real life. So this is one of the first extrasolar system colonies. So they're cut off from Earth for a while, and they're kind of on their own. They have kind of displaced some indigenous life forms that are semi-intelligent, but it turns out that they've been enslaved by this face eater creature who is now doing terrible things to the people. So the colonists are under threat. And so the Doctor and Sam have to deal with this, and as usual, this terrible face-eating creature has some right to being here, but its origins are mysterious and a little nefarious as well, so there's a lot to work out. So it's a neat book. On a personal level, this section of books was difficult to get through, partly because of the schooling I was going through at the time. I didn't have time to read, partly just because I was a little discouraged by just the weight of, will I ever get through this entire Eighth Doctor novel range? Ugh. So, pardon my lack of clear memories about these, but some interesting notes about these stories. They all take place in humanity's future. There's no going back to the past. So that was an interesting sort of theme. The science fiction aspect of the Eighth Doctor novel range is beginning to take shape here. I mean, stories like Alien Bodies and Vampire Science have already established that this is going to be a more science fiction sort of range than classic Doctor Who sometimes was. And indeed, that holds up through more of the series, so it's kind of fun. Another thing that starts happening here is that now that Sam is older, worse things are happening to her. The writers are like, all right, we've got a new version of Sam. She's more mature. All right, now we can really throw stuff at her. I mean, as if it wasn't bad enough that under mind control she killed a soldier that she had a crush on back in Option Lock before the whole Sam is missing thing. So now things are, really picking up the pace for her. And this is actually, I guess, in a way, the beginning of the chain of events that eventually draw her to leave the Doctor and go back home. Also, what this novel range is doing at this point is it's a year or two in at this point since this novel range began. So there's some confidence that the writers have developed now. Like, okay, this is established, this is happening, this is a thing, it's not about to go away. So they start picking up more continuity nods. Several of these books reference one another and sort of build upon one another. Not like this happens and now this happens as a result. It's not like a serialized thing, but Sam thinks back to what happened before, and things that they learn in one story helps inform another. So it's almost world building, but it's just continuity awareness that is happening more and more here, which any good series does as it builds over time. Also, the fact that the books have the the confidence, you could say, to reference the comics with Stacy and Sard back in Placebo Effect. The fact that they can start making connections with other ranges without threatening the integrity of this one or making it feel like it's derivative, or trying to justify itself by making more connections. So it's building. This is becoming a thing. And what we will see in the next chapter or two is the beginning of some real story arc building for the Eighth Doctor Adventures novels. But we're not there yet. This is one of the last sections of the novel range that is pretty much free and clear of continuity baggage. Yes, it's starting to be more self-referential, but it's not burdensome. It doesn't require you to have read previous novels to understand what's going on. So in terms of if you're looking for Eighth Doctor novels to cherry pick and just sort of read individually, all of these are fine. All these are great, and you won't have any real issues. I mean, it'll look back occasionally at previous events, but almost everything does that. So that's not a problem for understanding what's going on. So anyway, this is the Mature Sam arc, as I call it, and next time we'll meet Fitz, the next companion, who is actually the mainstay companion for most of the Eighth Doctor's time in the novels. But for now, Samantha Jones. She's still number one, still kicking, and some fun stories. Maybe I'll go back and read some of these again someday because it's been a while, and for the most part they're pretty good. So if you like science fiction, you like the Eighth Doctor, Chapter 4, the Mature Sam arc, good place to go and explore.